By the start of the following week, the project had picked up real momentum. It wasn't just internal discussions anymore. Chinadu had started looping in people from other departments, IT, operations, even someone from finance. The language around it had changed too. It wasn't just an initiative now. It was being described as a priority rollout. That shift mattered, because the more people involved, the harder it would be to quietly correct anything later. I stayed on the edges of it. Not completely removed, but not central either. He kept sending me small requests, data clarifications, minor adjustments, quick checks on numbers. Each one was framed like a standalone task, disconnected from the larger picture. And I kept responding the same way. Accurate, but narrow. Helpful, but incomplete. I didn't lie. I didn't sabotage anything directly. I just stopped doing the part of my work that connected everything together. That part, the structure, the dependencies, the weak points, stayed with me. On Tuesday afternoon, there was a cross-functional meeting in one of the larger conference rooms. I wasn't invited, but the walls were thin, and the door didn't close properly unless you pushed it hard. They hadn't. I wasn't trying to listen at first. I was just passing by on my way back from the printer when I heard my own words again. Reducing friction at the initial touch point. I stopped without thinking. Chinadu's voice. He was presenting to a bigger group now. I could hear other voices too. Questions, short responses, the sound of chairs shifting. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have. Can the current system handle that level of automation? Someone asked. There was a pause. It should, Chinadu said. We've reviewed the basic requirements. That wasn't true. There had been no full review, not the kind that mattered. I moved away before anyone noticed me standing there. Back at my desk, I opened my original document again. Not to reread it this time, but to look at the sections he kept skipping. Integration dependencies, failure scenarios, load limits. All the parts that didn't fit neatly into a presentation. Around 3 p.m., Ada messaged me. "Do you have a minute?" I walked over to her desk. She lowered her voice as soon as I got there. "Something's off with this project," she said. I didn't respond right away. "What do you mean?" I asked. She turned her monitor slightly so I could see. It was a draft timeline. "He wants to start testing with real clients in 2 weeks," she said. "Not internal testing. Actual onboarding cases." I looked at the dates. "That's fast," I said. "Too fast," she replied. "IT hasn't even confirmed if the system can handle partial automation like that." I nodded. "That came up in the meeting," she added. "He brushed it off." Of course he did. "Do you think it's workable?" she asked. There was a small pause. This was one of those moments where the answer mattered more than it seemed. "I think parts of it are," I said carefully, "but it depends on how it's implemented." She watched me for a second, like she was expecting more. I didn't give it. "Okay," she said finally. "It just feels like we're missing something." "Maybe," I said. I went back to my desk and sat down. That was the third shift. Other people were starting to notice gaps. Not clearly, not enough to challenge anything outright, but enough to feel that something wasn't fully lined up. And Chinadu was responding the only way he could, by pushing forward faster. Speed can cover a lot of problems, at least in the short term. If you move quickly enough, people don't have time to question details. They assume someone else has already checked. By Thursday, he had scheduled a progress update with senior management. That was sooner than expected. Usually, something like this would go through at least one internal review before being presented upward. But he skipped that step. Or maybe he just renamed it. The meeting invite went out late Wednesday night. I saw it in the shared calendar. My name wasn't on it. Again. That didn't surprise me anymore. What did catch my attention was the attachment. Onboarding Optimization, Executive Summary, version 1.3. I hadn't seen 1.1 or 1.2. I opened it. The core structure was still mine, but it had been compressed, simplified even further. The risk section was reduced to 2 lines. The projections were now fixed at a clean 15% improvement. No range, no conditions. And the timeline. Pilot launch, 14 days. Full rollout, 6 weeks. I stared at that for a long time. It wasn't just optimistic anymore. It was unrealistic. Around noon on Thursday, he stopped by my desk again. "Quick check," he said. "Those projections, we're still comfortable with the 15%, right?" I looked up at him. There it was. Not a request for analysis, not a discussion, a confirmation. "We?" I asked. He gave a small smile. "The team." I held his gaze for a second. "They depend on a few things," I said. "Like what?" "System capacity, client volume, how clean the data is during onboarding." He nodded quickly. "Right, but assuming those are stable." "They're not always stable," I said. Another small pause. Not long, but enough. "We'll monitor it," he said. "For now, I just need to confirm the number." I could feel the moment narrowing. This was where I could push harder, lay everything out, force the conversation into something real. Instead, I nodded. "If everything lines up," I said, "it's possible." He smiled again. "Great. That's all I needed." He walked off before I could add anything else. I watched him go, then turned back to my screen. That was the 4th shift. He wasn't just misunderstanding the idea anymore. He was actively shaping it into something that would hold up in a meeting, even if it didn't hold up in practice. And he was using my silence to support it. By the end of the day, the office felt different. Quieter in a way that didn't match how busy things actually were. People were working, sending emails, preparing for the next day's update. But there was an undercurrent of tension. Nothing obvious, just small things. Shorter conversations, slight hesitations before answering questions, a few more "we'll see" responses than usual. I packed up my things around 6:10 and shut down my computer. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of the conference room at the end of the hall. The door was closed this time, lights still on inside. He was probably in there, going over the presentation one more time. Adjusting slides, tightening language, making sure everything sounded right. I didn't need to see it. I already knew what version of the story he was going to tell. And I knew exactly what was missing from it. Not because he had removed it, but because he had never really understood it in the first place. The update meeting with senior management was at 9 a.m. on Friday. I wasn't invited, but by that point, that detail didn't matter anymore. The room they used was the larger boardroom near the front of the office, the one with the glass walls and the long table that always felt slightly too formal for the kind of conversations that happened in it. You couldn't hear much from outside unless someone raised their voice, but you could see everything. I got in at 8:45, earlier than usual. Not because I had anything specific to do, but because I didn't want to walk in halfway through whatever was about to happen. By 8:55, people had started filing into the boardroom. I recognized most of them, department heads, a couple of senior managers, and one of the directors who rarely showed up unless something was being seriously considered. Chinedu walked in last, carrying his laptop in that same folder. He looked composed, focused, like he believed in what he was about to present. I stayed at my desk, angled slightly so I could see into the room without making it obvious. My screen was open in front of me, but I wasn't really looking at it. At exactly 9:02, the meeting started. He connected his laptop this time. The screen lit up with the title slide. Onboarding Optimization Initiative. His name underneath. He began the same way he had earlier in the week, clear, confident, moving through the points at a steady pace. Even without sound, I could follow the structure. I knew it too well. Slide 2, problem statement. Slide 3, proposed solution. Slide 4, projected impact. That was where things started to shift. One of the directors leaned forward slightly. I could tell from the way he moved that he had asked a question. Chinedu responded, gesturing toward the screen, probably referencing the 15% figure again. The director didn't lean back. He stayed forward. That was the first sign. Then another question, this time from someone on the far end of the table, operations, I think. Chinedu clicked to the next slide. Timeline. I saw a few heads tilt, just slightly. Not disagreement, not yet, just attention sharpening. He kept going, but the rhythm had changed. It wasn't smooth anymore. There were more pauses between slides, more moments where he stopped, turned slightly, responded to something off-screen. Around 9:10, the first visible crack appeared. Someone, finance judging by where they were sitting, spoke for longer than the others had. I could see them flipping through a printed copy of the document, pointing at something specific. Chinedu leaned in, trying to follow. Then he straightened, shook his head slightly, and started explaining. Even from where I was sitting, I could tell he wasn't answering the exact question. He was circling it. That's something you only notice if you've been on both sides of those conversations. When someone understands the detail, they go straight to it. When they don't, they reframe, generalize, shift the focus. He clicked back a slide, then forward again. Another question came almost immediately after. This time, two people spoke, one after the other. He held up a hand slightly, like he was trying to take control of the flow again, but it didn't fully work. At 9:15, the director who had leaned forward earlier spoke again. Shorter this time, but more direct. Chinedu didn't answer right away. That pause was longer than the others. 5 seconds, maybe 6. In a normal conversation, that's nothing. In a room like that, it's noticeable. He said something finally, but as soon as he did, the director turned his head toward someone else at the table and said something in response. That wasn't a follow-up. That was a redirect. The conversation had moved away from him. I watched as two of them started discussing something between themselves. System capacity, I guessed, based on the part of the document they had been pointing at earlier. At 9:20, someone asked what looked like a very specific question. No gestures this time, no flipping pages, just eye contact and a short sentence. Chinedu nodded once. Then he opened his mouth and stopped. It was subtle. If you weren't watching closely, you might have missed it. But I saw it. He didn't have the answer. Not a partial one, not a vague one. Nothing. He looked down at his laptop, clicked once, then again, like the answer might be on a different slide. It wasn't. He said something after that, something general, something that sounded like it could apply but didn't fully connect. The person who asked the question didn't nod. They just looked at him for a second, then made a note on their paper. That was the moment it became irreversible. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. The version of the idea he had been presenting, the simplified, polished version, wasn't holding up under basic scrutiny. And the room had shifted from listening to evaluating. By 9:25, the energy had changed completely. People weren't leaning back anymore. They were leaning in, but not in the same way as before. Not interested, focused, looking for gaps. Each question got more precise, less room to generalize, less space to move around. He answered what he could, but it wasn't enough. At one point, he gestured toward the document, like the details were there if needed. One of them picked it up, flipped through it, then stopped at a page I recognized instantly. Integration dependencies. I had written that section carefully. It wasn't long, but it was specific. It outlined exactly where things could fail if certain conditions weren't met. Chinedu had reduced it to 2 lines in the summary. Now it was sitting in front of them, uncompressed. The person reading it looked up, asked something. Chinedu leaned in, trying to see which part they were referencing. They turned the page slightly, angling it toward him. He read it. And for a second, just a second, his expression changed. Not panic, recognition. Like he was seeing it properly for the first time. He started to respond, but the words didn't come as easily this time. Because that part, the part he had removed from the main narrative, didn't fit cleanly into what he had been saying. It complicated things. It slowed everything down. And now, he had to deal with it in real time. By 9:30, the meeting was already running past what had been scheduled. No one was wrapping up. No one was summarizing next steps. They were still in it, still asking, still pressing. I sat at my desk, hands resting on the keyboard, not typing anything, just watching. Because at that point, there was nothing left for me to do. He had taken the idea. He had shaped it into something he could present. But now, for the first time, he was being forced to stand inside it. Without the parts he had left out. Without the understanding he never built. And there was no way to smooth that over anymore. The meeting ended just before 9:40, not with a clear conclusion, but with that kind of quiet, controlled wrap-up that usually means people have already made up their minds and don't feel the need to say it directly. Chinedu closed his laptop slowly. No one rushed out. A few stayed seated, finishing notes, exchanging brief comments with each other. The director, who had asked most of the questions, stood up first, said something short to him, then walked out without waiting for a response. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need to. Chinedu nodded once, the way people do when they don't have anything to add. Then the room started to empty. He stayed behind for a minute or two, gathering his things, moving more slowly than usual. When he finally stepped out, he didn't look in my direction. He walked straight past, back toward his office, the folder tucked under his arm. I turned back to my screen before he could notice me watching. The office felt different after that. Not louder or quieter, just more aware. Conversations picked up in small pockets. People leaned closer when they spoke. A few glances toward the boardroom, then away again. By 10:15, the first message came through. It was from Ada. "Did you see how that went?" I stared at it for a second, then typed back, "Not fully." That wasn't exactly true, but it was enough. She replied almost immediately. "It didn't land well." I waited a moment before responding. "Why?" There was a short pause. "Too many gaps," she wrote. "They kept asking about integration, failure scenarios, scalability. He didn't have clear answers." I read that twice. Not because it was surprising, but because seeing it written out made it feel more concrete. "What happens now?" I asked. "Not sure," she replied. "They didn't approve anything. Asked for a revised plan, more detail." More detail. That was the part he had removed. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair. Around 11 o'clock, there was a team huddle, unscheduled. Chinedu stood at the front, same as always. If you hadn't been paying attention, you might have thought nothing had changed. "We had a discussion with senior management this morning," he said. "They're interested in the direction, but they want us to refine a few areas before moving forward." His tone was steady, measured. "They've asked for more detailed projections and a clearer implementation plan," he continued. "So we'll be focusing on that over the next few days." No mention of what had actually happened in the room. No mention of the questions he couldn't answer. Just a clean summary. Someone asked, "Are we still on track for the pilot timeline?" He paused. "Potentially," he said. "We'll confirm once we've addressed their feedback." That was the closest he came to acknowledging the shift. The meeting ended quickly after that. People went back to their desks, but the mood had changed. It wasn't excitement anymore. It was something more cautious. By early afternoon, the requests started coming in again. This time they were different, more specific, more urgent. At 1:10, I got an email from him. Subject: Need detailed breakdown. I opened it. "Can you pull a full analysis of onboarding delays across all client segments?" he wrote. "Also need scenarios showing impact under different system loads. ASAP." I read it once, then again. This wasn't a small request. This was the part he had skipped before, the part that took time, real time. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my original document again and scrolled to the sections he was now asking for. They were already there. Not in final form, but structured, thought through, with notes on what needed further validation. If I sent that to him now, fully intact, he could use it to patch the gaps. He could go back into the next meeting prepared. He could recover. I closed the document. Then I replied, "I'll start working on it." No attachment. No mention of what already existed. The rest of the afternoon followed the same pattern. More emails, more requests, each one digging into a part of the idea he hadn't explored before, each one carrying a sense of urgency that hadn't been there earlier in the week. Around 3:30, he came by my desk again. This time, he didn't try to keep it casual. "Hey," he said, leaning slightly closer. "I need those numbers as soon as possible. They're asking for specifics." "I'm working on it," I said. "How long?" he asked. I looked at my screen, then back at him. "Depends on how detailed you want it." "As detailed as possible," he said. "We need to cover all scenarios." That almost made me pause, because that was exactly what I had done from the beginning. "Okay," I said. He nodded, but didn't move right away. For a second, it felt like he might say something else. Maybe acknowledge something. Maybe connect the dots. But he didn't. He straightened and walked off. I watched him go, then turned back to my screen. By 5 o'clock, I had built out part of what he asked for. Not everything, just enough to show progress, enough to keep the process moving. I sent it over with a short message. "Initial breakdown attached, still working on additional scenarios." He replied within minutes. "Got it." No comment on the content. No questions, just acknowledgement. That told me something too. He wasn't reviewing it deeply yet. He was collecting pieces, trying to rebuild something he didn't fully have. As the day wound down, the office slowly emptied out. People left in small groups, conversations quieter than usual. A few stayed late, working through the new requests, adjusting to the shift in direction. I stayed until around 6:30, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see how things settled. Before I left, I checked my email one more time. There was a new message from him. Subject: Need detailed breakdown. Can we review this together tomorrow morning? He wrote. I want to make sure we're aligned before the next update. Aligned. I read the message twice. Then I closed my laptop. For the first time since this started, he was asking to sit down and go through the details with me. Not in passing, not as a quick request. Directly. I picked up my bag and turned off the light at my desk. Because by that point, the situation had shifted again. He wasn't just presenting the idea anymore. He was trying to understand it. And he needed me to get there.